quickly take a mental snapshot of what the 4 hour looks like here. Of course, we could react to one of these levels here, or we could react to something, above, right? But essentially, I would say that we are bullish in the short term, so we can keep on looking for longs and following this structure, right? So I'm gonna mark out really quickly this 4 hour zone because I forgot to mark it out previously, and then we can kind of refine it on the 15-minute to see if we're tapping into something more specific. It looks like we potentially are, right? But the way that I like marking out my 4 hour zones, as you guys know, is, well, any zone. It doesn't matter if it's the 4 hour, daily, 15-minute, because I like marking them out pretty liberally. I'll just mark out the larger overall range, because in this case, we can see that kind of tapped into here. Of course, we could come deeper into it, so I always try to cover, the high. You can also see it's part of like a chain that's almost started to form, which is also a flip. So we'll quickly mark that out too, because that's kind of relevant to what we're looking at, right? Especially because we're now trading and reacting off of this 4 hour zone, right? There may be potential for shorts, right? So what I'm gonna do is just kind of mark that out. So there's our flip zone, right? We can see this demand level had failed. It's the same point in which structure actually broke to the downside as well. And now we can look at the 15-minute. So really quickly here, I'm gonna do a little quick quiz with you guys. I'm gonna push price over to, well, I'm gonna push it through Asia session here, and just before London session, right? This is Frankfurt, right around 2 a.m. What I want you guys to do is mark out our internal structure or our substructure based on this. So you guys can pull out your pen tool. We'll make it a little bit interactive. I want you guys to try and tell me, who is in control here. You can mark out zones as well, but try to keep it clean. Here we go. I got Castleman, John Marco. Okay, good. So we have demand holding. Yeah. We know that our swing structure on the 15-minute is bullish, right? We have a nice chain, nice Murphy. That's good, right? Castleman's marking out the supply that we're sort of tapping into again. So what do you guys think is weak though? There's a couple ways it can go, right? I mean, there's always going to be multiple scenarios that price is going to kind of follow, right? Okay, so I'm guessing that you guys are thinking it's going to hold off of there. Shane, do you think it's going to hold off there, or do you think we're going to target that high? I'm going to start marking it out. Shane, you can talk, by the way. I don't know if you're muted, but weak high. Okay, Antoine thinks it's a weak high. Castleman, I don't know what you said. Captain thinks it's a weak high. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a weak high too. I mean, we kind of saw what happened. You guys know what happens, but try to look at this from an unbiased perspective, right? We're in a 4 hour zone. I know a lot of people would try to short here, right? And granted, this could hold for the short term as well, right? What we're going to do is, I'm going to delete your drawings for a second. We're going to observe what happens next. And we're going to try to approach this. Dasha, to draw on the screen, look for the little annotate button. There's a little pencil button. I'll let you quickly draw before we continue, because I think this is a good exercise. Let me know if you can find it or not. I'm going to delete everybody else's and start marking this up in the meantime though. Yeah, Alex, exactly. So Alex is saying, isn't the expectational order flow that the high is weak until we see demand fail? Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that demand is in control over here, currently anyways. Now, does that mean that supply can't hold or won't hold? It might, right? But probabilistically, we are essentially expecting that, yeah, the highs are weak. Of course, there is a lot of liquidity to the downside in the form of IRL, so we have to be careful of that. We just want to try and be unbiased and consider both scenarios, right? Doesn't mean that we won't short either. There's certain situations where we might, right? But right now we see demand is holding overall. So I'm gonna quickly just delete everybody's drawings here. Dash, I know you found it. You can keep on drawing if you want. Everybody else, hold off. I want Dash to kind of have an opportunity to do it. But essentially, I'm gonna start marking these out, and we'll kind of mark this as IRL, right? And of course, let's mark out this high, which again, we're expecting is weak. It may or may not be a CPB. Until it actually fails, I'm not gonna mark it as a CPB, because again, it might hold, right? It might hold in order to push lower so it can mitigate a zone down here and then continue trading higher, right? So let's see. So it is holding, at least for the short term, right? Maybe you could have shorted this. I don't know about, you know, going on the 1 minute and shorting there. If you want to scalp it that way, you can. But again, we're going to try to just stay on the 15 minute here for this call anyways. We can see that there's a very clear demand chain, right? But of course, when demand chains or supply chains hold too much, they become huge pools of liquidity. So John Marco, to sort of cover some of the things that you were asking about liquidity, you know, what we're expecting liquidity to do, we have this liquidity that's sitting here. Maybe we can expect a deeper pullback, right? We don't want to be like naive about it and just think, okay, because it's, you know, demand's in control, it's going to hold forever, right? It's not always the case. So I'll just quickly mark this one out too, because we kind of like chained off of here too, technically. We also have this kind of unmitigated part, right, sitting below here. So yeah, I would say that overall, okay, demand's in control. It kind of flipped off of some stuff here as well. We'll quickly mark that out. But we're expecting kind of a weak high. So let's see what happens next. Okay, demand is kind of continuing to hold. Now we're starting to trade a little bit lower. Let's see what happens through London session. Look, we end up holding, right? So despite everybody's kind of expectation that, you know, this high is weak, and I'm not saying that it isn't weak. Of course, I think that it's going to get, you know, taken eventually. Look, we're getting a pullback here. Price just needed to essentially trade lower to take the liquidity that was sitting below it. Does that make sense? And now we're kind of tapping into this 15-minute zone. Let's see if we respect that. So demand was in control. We swept this small chain. We've now tapped into this larger external chain that we were in previously. And now we can expect that price is either going to sweep these lows and then continue higher. I mean, or we could end up continuing to take IRL that's inevitably sitting below all of these levels here too, right? So this is obviously Monday. Let's see what happens. Here's New York session we're starting to come into here. I'm expecting that price is going to start to trade higher. So let's start marking out some zones here, and if we start reacting to it and there's a potential, you know, good trade opportunity there, we'll throw an order on it. There you go. We start to push up, right? So essentially, despite the fact that we didn't really get, you know, a change of character or anything, if we play the larger overall, you know, structure that's sitting here, there's a good probability that this is going to hold. Of course, we would of course get break even on it. Let's see how it plays out. I'm not going to go too heavy on, you know, marking out my break even points and stuff like that. Try to be quick about it, because again, we have a few other pairs that people want us to cover today. But look, now on the opposite side, we essentially have internal range liquidity, or trendline liquidity, if you want to call it that, that we can now target, right? So I'm just going to delete this. What I'm going to do is mark it like this above all of these zones. Again, we can even target this one, right? Now, it's a little confusing because essentially we have supply and demand holding on both sides, and of course we have liquidity sitting above and below, right? So there we go. We're starting to continue to push up. Now, is there a chance that this high can hold? What do you guys think? It's really a trick question. It should be obvious to you guys. Is the high gonna hold, or is it gonna fail? What do you guys think? Like, let's try to assign like percentage probabilities of it. Okay, so John Marco thinks it's a CPV. What do you think the likelihood is that it's gonna get taken out? Okay, we think it's weak. Okay, good. So do we think maybe, okay, 70% chance it's gonna get taken out? 80%? Weak. Okay. Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't go as far as saying 80%, maybe 70%. 80% is like almost certain, right? There we go. We end up taking it out. We form a CPV. Okay, great. We formed a CPV. Now we have a level of demand that is kind of formed as a flip, and potentially price will continue to react bullish off of that. Or we're going to take the liquidity that's formed underneath this level, right? I want you guys to kind of picture it this way too. John Marco, this is kind of to address, again, your question about liquidity. If you're longing here, where's your stop loss? Here, right? So anytime you have your stop loss at a level like this, wouldn't there be other people trying to take that same long? And the answer to that is yes, right? Meaning that there's liquidity sitting below this low, right? So I'm going to leave this on here. Whether it works or not, we'll find out in a second, right? because I'm expecting that there's still a pretty good chance of these highs getting run as well. But we know that this is overall, a little bit more of an aggressive position to try and take in the market. Why? Well, the reason for that is because, of course, there's liquidity below it. And when there's liquidity below certain levels, there is a chance that it is going to get swept, right? So let's see. Are we going to get swept? Yeah, we do, right? So it's just a little bit too attractive to whoever is manipulating price. They knew that there were a bunch of orders sitting here. And this is the way that we try to teach you guys to think, with the way that we trade in Phantom, right? Regardless of the fact that we trade whatever, smart money and stuff. Of course, retail traders, in a way, may trade the same way. It depends on the types of patterns that they're using and stuff. But in this case, look, got swept out. Now we can kind of expect that price with a high likelihood is either going to push up. I think that's the higher probability scenario, or we're going to continue to push down. We may even get taken out of this, right? Because you have to think, now we're respecting this external level of supply. Again, of course, this is weak, but let's see what happens next, right? We're now coming into the later hours, so I'm expecting we're probably going to range a bit. But let's see what happens. We'll hold that long position, right? So what happened? We swept, and now we're starting to push up, right? So again, they're just grabbing the liquidity that's sitting below there. So if you want to call it like, the work that liquidity has to do, John Marco, that's what I would consider, the work that it has to do. You can try and take, riskier positions like this flip, right? And sometimes these are, good positions to take, especially if there's a lot of like volume in the market, especially when there's not a lot of, overlap with wicks, in the 15-minute. I would say that would be a better, way to approach trying to take a, a pretty aggressive like continuation trade in this case. We can see that there really was no imbalance except for, down at this level, right? So price was essentially trading up and down within, this 30-minute period, right? Showing that there's not a lot of conviction to one side or the other. So of course you got swept out because price is a little more corrective than that, right? There wasn't a ton of momentum behind it. Okay, we're going to continue to sort of range here in Asia, and let's see what happens next. So now we're starting to take out some of these highs, and now we can maybe expect that, well, obviously demand is still in control here. We're violating our levels of supply overall, right? Now we can expect that this high is going to go, right? So I'm going to zoom into this a little bit more, and again, I want you guys to try to mark out. Well, let me actually push this over to Frankfurt session for a sec. Go to right around here. Okay, so same thing. I want you guys to mark out the subtle nuances of what is happening in the order flow here. Again, you can use the box tool or the line tool, but what I want you guys to just show me is where supply is failing and where demand is holding. If you guys can do that with the annotate tool. Okay, good. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for exactly. And of course, within that, we can start to look at our supply and demand reactions and see if there's liquidity being built in between, right? Because that's really what happened here too, right? We had liquidity that was built in between to induce people, right? People who were buying here, they got swept out, and then price went, right? We're always kind of looking for that pattern, right? Whether there was something to trade off of or not. I mean, you could have maybe played like that. Chris, I personally wouldn't, but I'm not saying it's not valid. Of course, on the 5-minute, this is going to be at demand level, right? Probably a bearish candle, but we're always looking for, in a bullish market, to build liquidity, right? Sweep it, and then continue to push higher. Or sometimes we'll build liquidity, push up, and then we'll retest after we swept something. Does that make sense? And then continue higher. But again, of course, the more we build liquidity in the form of chains and stuff, the more IRL is formed, either for later or the immediate future. Anyways, it's good how you guys marked that out. Good little test. I'm gonna mark out some of these levels too. Of course, you can mark it out one of two ways, right? The way I like doing it, because it's a lot cleaner, is rather than marking out the entire zone, I'll just use this tool here to sort of denote my substructure breaks. So we have this one, right? And then, of course, in between that, we can mark out the liquidity that's being formed. The easier way to sort of do that is, of course, by marking out the entire zone, right? We can see that price had reacted here, right? It then swept this inside bar and then continued to sort of chain. So again, I'm going to try to mark this out in the cleanest way that I can, right? That looks pretty decent. Of course, price tapped into that, Now we're pushing up higher. We have a nice position here. Maybe we targeted this. I mean, if you're, again, if you're risking 0.5%, 1%, you're looking at 2.5 to 5% gain on your account, which is pretty sizable in my opinion. 5R is 5R. Can't complain with that. And of course, we're continuing to push up. We're getting deeper into this 4-hour zone. Now, what do you guys think is going to happen next? We're now in London session. We've taken out a bunch of liquidity that was sitting above here, right? Again, if you were, from the perspective of somebody who was trying to short off of this because we're in a 4-hour zone, and you see that supply is kind of holding, and of course it violated these demand levels previously, maybe you shorted off of this, right? Again, it's not that it's necessarily wrong, it's just lower probability, right? Of course there was a chance that this was going to hold, and if you were short here, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, your stop loss would be sitting above it, right? So now essentially those people have been liquidated out of their positions. You can expect that price is likely going to pull back, right? Now, does that mean we're going to start looking for shorts? Not necessarily. You can, but it's pretty risky, right? We don't know if price is just going to continue pushing up. I would say there's a good chance of that, but to try and catch a falling knife here, you're really you're playing with fire, right? So you got to be careful. So I want you guys to keep on kind of thinking about it from a market direction standpoint, and also from a probabilistic standpoint, right? Just keep on thinking, what's the probability of, if I enter here short right now, do we have a good chance of getting taken out, right? So let's do that just in theory, right? Because I know a lot of you guys do this too. Maybe you see a sweep, and maybe you try to look, look at price action and try to say, okay, maybe we tapped into some really random zone, right? Without really giving it much thought, right? Here's a serious question for a lot of you guys that are in here, and maybe you're not guilty of this, but how many of you would mark out a really random flip zone like this, and then without waiting for order flow to shift, try to short this? And maybe you've done it in the past. 0 to 100, I hope so, Eric. I hope that's the case. But you guys can be honest. Just say in chat, right? Have you ever done it? I've done it before. Without a doubt, I've done that. Right? I've done it, but not a good practice. Yeah. It may work maybe 1 in 50 times, maybe even 1 in 10 times, right? Okay, Castleman's done it. Arnab has done it, not anymore. But here's the thing, right? You end up learning your lesson pretty quickly, right? Stop doing that when data shows probably 15% or less probability. Exactly, right? So that's why we're trying to assign probabilities of where price is going to trade to next as best as we can, right? So let's just put this on in theory. Let's pretend we're an amateur SMC trader or whatever, and let's see what happens. We get taken out, right? So look, we didn't even get much of a pullback, right? We took this high out. Maybe we'll get the pullback a little bit later, right? As we come into the extreme of this 4-hour. But again, there's no guarantees of price trading in one direction or the other, right? It's all just probabilities. So I'm just trying to instill that sort of mindset with you guys, because it's gonna help ease, some of the stress of trading. It can be stressful when you're taking losses, and then maybe you kick yourself and stuff, right? But I would say that's perfectly normal a lot of the time, right? As you're learning how to trade, it's gonna happen inevitably. So keep marking this stuff out. Hey, what's up?
Cool. Excuse me, before you continue, can I ask a question about something that we were kind of debating on the chat?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So on the previous move where you have your entry on the chart, where you asked if the high or if the supply zone was gonna break or was gonna hold, and the percentage of probability of it holding versus breaking.
Yeah.
So some of us were kind of confused why the probability of breaking was so high, taking into account that we just tapped into a 4H supply zone. So yeah, I don't know if you could clarify a little bit that.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'll clarify for all of you for a second. Just because there's a 4-hour zone does not mean that it's gonna hold, right? I remember, I think it was on Tuesday, I was talking to Blackwatch about this, well, on GU anyways, and he was like, he said something that I guess will kind of dispel it a little bit, right? He wasn't saying I hope this 4-hour zone holds, or oh, this 4-hour zone is probably going to hold, or is going to hold. He's like, I wonder if this 4-hour zone is going to hold. You see the distinction? Like, we don't know, right? We know that overall, that either this could be used as liquidity for a zone above, or we could end up reversing completely, right? There's a chance of that happening, right? So until things shift, like really shift, and start to show us that we're going to start to take out IRL on, you know, the 15-minute and 4-hour, you can just keep on taking longs, right? Because regardless of the fact that, okay, maybe this will hold, you know, that's typically where we'll start to take losses and stuff, right? If we're going to try to be like too certain about, you know, one thing holding or not, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't take shorts off of this, but maybe just wait a bit, wait until price develops more, and then you can try to find a more high probability short if it is going to end up holding as a 4-hour zone, right? But currently what's happening is we have internal range liquidity, right? And we can see that we're just continuing to take it, right? So despite the fact that we're bearish overall, right? I'm not even going to use premium and discount for this. Like, forget that for a second. We have IRL that's sitting here, and what happens when there's IRL? We're going to keep on taking it, right? These are all points that are right now fueling this move up, right? They're on the opposite side of the action. Does that make sense? And Castlemane, by the way, like, because I see you're saying, okay, you tried to short from, I don't know which POI. I'm guessing maybe this one because you're in the 4-hour. There's nothing wrong with that. You can take losses initially. It's fine, right? As long as you try to stay unbiased and you look for longs as well, because the order flow and structure on 15-minute is bullish at the current moment, right? We're pulling back, right? So I don't know, Nestor, if I answered that well or not. Does that make sense? It's kind of a hard thing to explain, but
Yeah, I guess so. So we never take for granted any supply or demand zone, like expecting that it will do what we want to do, but we just watch. And what I'm also got is that we would need to see the shift in the lower time frame, which didn't happen. So that's why we still have a bullish bias. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. But so here's the thing. They did try to fake us out into it, right? If we go back to the 15-minute for a second, let's take a look at this. Did they try to shift it bearish? They did, right? Like it did shift into bearish order flow for a little bit to build liquidity, right? But inevitably demand was in control here. And again, I'm not saying that price couldn't have, you know, broken these levels. That's probably when I would start looking for shorts, to be honest, right? And maybe if you're a scalper and you like to trade the 1 minute, maybe you want to try to take shorts at certain levels like this, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Like if you had taken a short here in London as a scalper, I think that's fine, right? And maybe you took partials down here and you were expecting that it was going to continue to push lower because we were in that 4-hour zone. Nothing wrong with that, right? But this is why we take partials and stuff too, right? But yeah, let's go back to the 4-hour for a second and let me try to like develop this idea a little bit more in everybody's head, right? So again, liquidity sitting above here. There's even liquidity sitting above here, right? Remember, these are all just decisional levels. There is, of course, the chance that price will react to this. That's one scenario, right? The other scenario is we continue to push up. We react to this one, right? There's certain levels that I would say also have like a higher probability of holding. Again, I would say this is probably has a lower probability, despite the fact that it's a chain and stuff, right? Do we really sweep any liquidity on the 4-hour? Not really. Does this one sweep something? I would say so, right? So maybe we're going to see these all use as IRL for this zone, right? And then we're going to start to see price fall off. I can't actually remember what we held off of, to be honest with you guys, on EU, but I think it starts to turn around on Wednesday or whatever, or maybe it sweeps this, right? Do you guys remember? I know I took a trade off of it, and that's where I banked, I don't know, a good 5-hour or something, just on the 15-minute too. But you know, until then, right? Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I want to try to drive the point home that it doesn't matter if you're in a 4-hour zone. It could hold, it couldn't hold. It doesn't matter, right? We just try to react to it. Stop trying to predict price so far ahead into the future, right? And trying to call whether or not a zone is going to hold, right? But yeah, anyways, let's go back to the 15 minutes. Let's keep observing this. And let's see. Okay, so London session looks like, what did we do? We tapped into this larger 15-minute zone up here. and see that we're tapping into this, right? And so we're probably going to get some sort of pullback now. Whoops, not a 4 hour, it's a 15 minute. And it also looks like we've closed above on the 15 minutes, so we've now broken, our structure, right? So I'd really be looking at this as my structure break. To make it simple, we'll just use this, right? And we can see that order flow is still bullish, demand is still in control, right? So now again, if we start to see order flow shift, we can start looking for shorts and stuff. If you want to be more risky about it and potentially sacrifice, your strike rate a little bit, of course you can look for, high risk counter trend shorts. But I don't like doing that. I like sticking to the high probability trades and really just trying to avoid losses, right? That's the other way that you guys can look at it too, is rather than looking for high probability trades, how can you avoid the low probability ones, right? So I don't know if any of you have had that sort of like mindset shift as well, but I find that that really helps me a lot too. Something that I've been doing a lot in backtesting this week, because of course I backtest at night and stuff with Dan. Sometimes I do it with Dan, sometimes I do it alone. One thing I like practicing is, trying to think, okay, where are some levels that I would normally take losses from, and how can I profit off of them? You guys ever try to do that? So like even with this, right? Like maybe I'd be thinking normally, maybe I'll take a loss from something like this. Like, okay, how can I take a long to actually profit off of it on the flip side, right? And that's a good perspective shift too, because it helps you avoid taking a loss, and then it helps you look for a way to actually profit off of it, right? So, in this case, right, even maybe you're too aggressive with longs. Maybe you wait until it sweeps it out, and then you look for a long here or something. Now, granted, this is an Asia session. That doesn't mean you can't trade Asia session either, right? I would say this is a pretty nice level to potentially play off of, even though supply was still overall in control here, right? But again, you're just thinking about the probabilities. If you think that, if this is a level that you would normally take losses off of, and you think that there's a high probability that that level is going to fail, just look for longs, right? In the case of bullish price action. On the flip side, right, if you think that there is a level like this of demand that you think is going to hold, that you think isn't going to hold, right, play the flip side of it. Try to take shorts into it, right, and target it. So you can use kind of like low probability zones to help identify liquidity to target, right? It's the same way that we kind of look for weak highs and stuff when we look at structure. And so it's just about folding all of those concepts into each other. That makes sense? So again, would you guys try to take a short off of here? Anyone? What do you guys think? Or should we target it? Because obviously demand's still in control here. Anyone? No? Long still? Okay. So do you want to keep on taking longs off of this maybe? What do you guys think? How about because this inside bar got taken out? If we can even call this a substructure break on the 15 minute. Would you guys try to take shorts now? Let's see how this plays out, because I want to see if I can kind of illustrate another point that I want to get at here of how this could work. You want a floor first, okay. Okay, good. Okay, so it ended up failing, right? So I was hoping that it would hold so I could illustrate to you guys that sometimes that 20% chance of something working ends up working out, right? Now, does that mean you should be marking it out in your end of days and trying to say that it's valid? Like, say that hadn't worked out, right? Would you mark that out at the end of the day and say, okay, I missed this trade, I should have taken it? I would hope not, right? Because it's really not that valid. Sometimes things can work out that are just not valid trades, right? And same on the flip side. You can have a really high probability setup that ends up failing for whatever reason, right? And it's not necessarily because you read price wrong, it's just the probability and the nature of price action in the market, right? So that obviously failed. It's kind of weird because it's struggling to continue to push up. We're starting to round off in price a bit, right? So let's see what happens in New York session now. Of course, I would still be looking for longs potentially here, but I'm gonna actually approach this with caution now, because of course we're tapping into the extreme of this. And look, inevitably the 4 hour can hold, right? Even though I said it might not hold, we're gonna react to what price is doing, right? I'm not gonna try to predict it. It could have held from here, right? It could hold from here. Of course, it could fail too, right? What happens? Okay, continues to push up, right? So we don't even really get much of an opportunity to take longs here, except for the one that we had here, or if you had taken a long from Asia, right? So let's just see in theory. I know we didn't really catch this, but let's see in theory, if we had taken a long at this level here in Asia, right? How can we justify it? I mean, it's not really even much of a flip, but we did have liquidity that was formed here as a reaction to this supply level, which then subsequently got taken out. Yeah, exactly. I think Castlemane, you marked that out, right? Or whoever is in red. We can see we swept that liquidity. That was essentially, if we covered the, let's cover the window of imbalance here. We can see that we tapped into that. We swept liquidity. Then we tapped into this demand zone sitting below. Then we continue to push up, right? So again, we'll just do it in theory, right? And then we can kind of look at targets as well. But regardless, I know that I would be looking to take at least partials at this high, and of course partials at these highs, right? So even if we did a hard TP here, for example, right? I mean, you're looking at 8 plus 6R, and that's a really good week already, and we're only 2 days into it, right? So again, I'm just trying to explain the logic behind like what I'm thinking, right? Kind of how Blackwatch does in a lot of his commentaries and stuff. But look, like we said, right? We have all this IRL to kind of play with, all this IRL to target, right? Again, maybe there are people who shorted here previously. Maybe there are people that are breakout traders with stop limit buy orders sitting here, fueling this move up. I mean, look, price is starting to go parabolic, right? I mean, it really started to do it here. We showed signs of kind of rounding off, but it was really just a very weak pullback, right? We didn't even get back to this level. And then price continues to push up, right? Push up, and that's a crazy rally. So what happens after huge rallies? Well, sometimes price likes to pull back, right? So let's see if we can wait until price starts to shift order flow, and let's take a look at the 4 hour and see if we are in some sort of 4 hour zone. And again, sometimes we can react to inconspicuous levels that we think are low probability of holding, right? Like this one, we held temporarily. Same with this one. This may just be a CPB even, right? Maybe we will end up holding, oops, from the extreme level here that actually did, sweep, and that we would consider higher probability, right? So we got liquidity sitting here, right? And I mean, we're pretty high up in the leg, but you can kind of approach this from 2 perspectives. Either we can look for shorts if order flow shifts, or we just keep on looking for longs, right? Wait for a pullback, look for a long, and keep trading with the trend, right? There's nothing wrong with that either. So we don't always want to be looking for reversals, right? I found like it's a lot easier to make money just playing continuations, just even on the 15-minute, right? If we just keep on looking to take longs while price is bullish, you can just ride the wave up, right? We don't need to get in at the bottom. We don't need to get out at the top, right? And vice versa if we're trying to short. So hope that makes sense to you guys. So let's see. Okay, we're starting to sweep the high a bit, or at least this local high that we built. I don't really see any way that we could have taken a long yet. We just kind of continue to push up, right? I want you guys to consider too, right? You have, just let's look at this from a retail trader's perspective for a second. If you were a retail trader, there are retail traders that will enter at the close of a bullish engulfing bar. So even if you entered long here, right? I'm not saying that you should do that because that's not the way that we trade here. We want to try to stick to a somewhat consistent strategy, right? Trading SMC and stuff. But, even if we look to like take a long from this, engulfing bar covered this low, you'd be looking at another 5-hour trade, right? So again, if you need to look at it from a retail trader's perspective and take from them what actually does work, in that case I think that it would work well, right? Take it and try to look for, again, just continuations, right? Maybe you'll have an opportunity to take a retest long on the 1 minute here, right? I don't know if you guys see like some of Blackwatch's commentaries, if you watch them or not. You'll see sometimes he'll just wait for a 15-minute to form, and then on the 1 minute he's looking there for some sort of continuation, or even the 5 minute, where price is essentially within that 15-minute zone, right? So say we have our wick, our body, right? So pretend there's a 15-minute bearish candle or something, right? In a bullish leg, right? He'll be looking here. He's like, okay, see some sort of setup. It's like, okay, take the continuation long. He's break even really early because it's pro trend, and that's how he's catching those longs, right? So what he's doing is really not that far off from, you know, the guy that is trying to buy at the close of the next engulfing bullish candle, right? Say this is a bullish candle here, right? And say we wicked here and wicked here, and he's buying here. His stop loss is down here. Blackwatch is buying down here. His stop loss, maybe he's even covering the low, right? Of course he's gonna make more R on it, but they're both right, and they're both gonna make R off of that move. Make sense? So yeah, I mean, moving averages are great in trending markets, right? Not so much in markets that are ranging. You know what I mean? So let's see. Do you guys think that these demand levels are gonna hold here? I'm gonna draw this as a range actually. We'll just see. Would you guys be interested in buying here? What do you guys think? Okay, that's a good point actually, Alex, that you brought up. Parity. I wasn't even paying attention to that. Yeah, we are kind of trading very close to parity, right? Parity means that the currencies are 1-to-1. Yeah, like literally 1.00, right? Some people are saying the level's too high. So, okay, Gianmarco, this is one thing I'm gonna argue, even though I'm pretty sure this one's gonna fail. Again, there's gonna be certain situations where just keep buying, right? Like, I almost want you guys to throw the idea of premium discount. I don't like the idea of premium discount much, to be honest. Like, it works sometimes, right? But, you know, I would say, and there's a reason we don't like use it so heavily in, like, you know, the way that we trade and stuff, because it's just not that good. So anyways, let's play forward here for a little bit. Give me 1 second.